The doorbell rang before I even realized I'd fallen asleep on the kitchen floor. I hadn't moved since 3:17 a.m. when I got that text. Now it was 7:02 a.m. My mouth was dry, my hands were shaking, and someone was ringing my doorbell like they were trying to break the sound barrier. Then came the knocking. I stood up slowly, one vertebra at a time. My spine sounded like bubble wrap. I was still barefoot, still wearing the same gray hoodie from yesterday. There was a piece of shredded mail stuck to my elbow. When I opened the door, 2 officers were waiting on the porch. One older, one younger. Both looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Clint McGuire?" the older one asked. I nodded, confused. My throat didn't work yet. I was still hungover on shock. "You're the primary leaseholder at this residence?" "Yeah," I croaked. "You're being accused of unlawful eviction, financial retaliation, and coercive control by your legal spouse," he said, like he was reading off a checklist. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "She says you locked her out, drained the joint account, and disabled her credit cards while she was out of state." I didn't answer. Instead, I turned back toward the kitchen table where my phone still lay face down. That was where this all started. Not even 4 hours ago. It was 3:17 a.m. I had just come back from peeing in the dark, accidentally stepped on a Lego, don't ask, it's not mine, and noticed a notification on my lock screen. Tamara, my wife. Text message. One image. One sentence. The photo. She's standing in front of some neon-lit wedding chapel, grinning like she won the lottery, champagne in one hand, her other arm linked with some smug-looking guy in a cobalt blue tuxedo. The message. "Married my coworker. You're pathetic. Don't wait up." I stared at it for 10 minutes, maybe 20. I zoomed in. I zoomed out. I checked the timestamp. It was real. No context. No explanation. Not even a sorry. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel. I just went to my computer, closed our joint accounts, logged her out of everything, turned off her phone line. She was on my plan. Blocked her Uber. Froze her cards. Changed the locks. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because something snapped. After 10 years of loyalty, after working 2 jobs while she got her master's, after driving her to doctor's appointments, therapy sessions, job interviews, this was my reward? Married my coworker. Just like that. I didn't even know which coworker. I just knew she was in Vegas. And apparently, she was no longer my wife. So yeah, when the cops showed up and asked if I knew why they were here, I didn't lie. "I have a guess," I muttered. "Would you like to explain your side of the situation?" The younger officer asked. And I almost laughed, because I didn't even know my side yet. All I knew was this wasn't over. It wasn't even close. The officers didn't stay long. Turns out, if you're not yelling, hitting anyone, or hiding a body in your trunk, they don't have a lot of legal authority to do much about a woman accusing you of financial retaliation after she literally eloped in another state. Still, they took a few notes, asked if I had a lawyer, and then one of them said, "You should expect follow-up," before handing me a business card like it was a parking receipt. As soon as the door shut, the silence was deafening. The kind that isn't empty, but vibrating. Full of pressure. Like the quiet right before a car crash. I walked back into the kitchen, sat on the cold tile floor, and just stared at my phone. She still hadn't called. No new texts. Not even a "hey, by the way, sorry about nuking our marriage." Just that one smug photo. The dress. The idiot. The neon chapel. And that sentence. "You're pathetic." I should have deleted it. I didn't. I kept looking at it over and over, like some kind of emotional masochist. Part of me was hoping there was a clue in her eyes. Some sign it was fake, a joke gone too far. But no. She looked free. Relieved, even. I don't know how much time passed before my phone finally rang. But when it did, my hand actually jerked, like I'd been shocked. It was her. Tamara, wife. The name still hadn't updated in my contacts. I didn't even hesitate. I answered on the first ring. "Hey," she said, like nothing had happened. I could hear water sloshing in the background. She was in a bathtub. I didn't respond. She kept talking. "So, I assume you saw the picture." My mouth went dry, but I forced out a single word. "Yeah." There was a pause, like she expected me to scream or cry or beg. I did none of those things. I just waited. Finally, she spoke again. "Hunter and I are married. It's legal. Don't be dramatic." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insane. "You flew to Vegas on Friday," I said. "We had dinner Thursday night. You were making jokes about that awful Netflix true crime thing. And now you're telling me you're legally married? After 11 years together, I get a text? Tamara sighed like I was the one being difficult. Clint, we've been dead for years. You just didn't want to see it. You were always so small. Like you thought folding laundry without being asked made you a saint. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stood up slowly, one hand on the counter, gripping it like the words alone could knock me over. She went on. Hunter's ambitious. He makes moves. He's not afraid to call people out. You just bake banana bread and rewatch sitcoms. I felt something crack in my chest. I wasn't perfect. God, I knew that. But I tried. I tried to be the stable one. The soft place to land. The guy who made her tea when she cried after layoffs at work. The one who held her when she had a panic attack so bad she bit through her lip. And now I was pathetic? I took a breath, but she cut me off. I called the bank. You froze everything. I'm going to fix that. And if you think you can lock me out of that house like I'm some side chick, you're out of your mind. My jaw clenched. You got married to someone else in a different state. Tamara. You left. You told me not to wait up. She went quiet for a beat, then said it. If you don't fix this by tonight, I swear to God, Clint, I will make your life very difficult. You think the police showing up this morning was awkward? Try a civil suit. And just like that, she hung up. No goodbye, no emotion, just click. I stood there, holding the phone to my ear even after the call ended, like I was afraid to move. My heart was thudding so hard I could hear it in my eardrums. I don't know how long I stood there before I realized what this really was. This wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't a breakup. It was war, and I was hopelessly outmatched. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was crying. That had stopped sometime after the bathtub call, but because my body wouldn't let me sit still. I paced like a man waiting for the ground to collapse. I tried to eat. Couldn't. Tried to distract myself by folding laundry, alphabetizing spice jars, vacuuming the already clean carpet. Still nothing. The adrenaline wouldn't burn off. It just kept reloading, like a wave that refuses to crash. At 2:20 a.m., I opened my laptop and did something I had forgotten we even had set up. I logged into the home security system. We'd installed a few cameras last summer, one over the front door, one pointed at the driveway, and one inside the garage. Tamara said it was for peace of mind back then, but she hadn't even looked at the app once since we installed them. I was the only one who ever checked it. At first, there was nothing. Just the usual motion triggers from squirrels, mailmen, and the neighbor's teenager sneaking out with a vape pen. But then I scrolled back further, to the morning she left for Vegas. That's when I noticed something odd. Tamara didn't leave with just her suitcase. She left with two. A large black roller I'd never seen before and a gray duffel I was pretty sure came from the back of my closet, the one I used for weekend fishing trips. She wasn't just packing light for a 3-day work retreat. She had packed like someone relocating. And then there was the man. He didn't come to the front door. Didn't ring the bell. But at 5:38 a.m., less than 30 minutes before her flight, I saw a tall figure walk up our driveway from the side alley, open the passenger door of a waiting car, and stand beside it while she wheeled both bags out of the garage. I leaned in close to the screen. My stomach flipped. Even with the grainy footage, even without seeing his face clearly, I knew that was Hunter. I recognized the pretentious haircut, the tattoo sleeve that never quite matched his business casual sweaters, the confident way he stood like the world owed him rent. He didn't just meet her in Vegas. He helped her leave, and she never said a word. For 10 minutes, I sat there, staring at the frozen frame of her hugging him on our driveway, her back turned toward our house, like it was already a memory she'd moved past. I hadn't even woken up when she left. I was asleep in the same bed we shared for years, while she snuck away with another man and my duffel bag. Something cracked deep in my chest. Not just betrayal, not even anger. It was the sheer absurdity of it all. Like I had become a guest in my own life, watching a stranger's world fall apart. Every memory started to feel fake. Every moment replayed in my head came with a new doubt. Had she already planned this when she bought me that stupid mug that said "Best Husband Ever Last Christmas"? Was that smile over dinner a lie? Was anything real? I couldn't go back to sleep after that. Instead, I started opening drawers, going through closets, lifting couch cushions, like maybe there was more. Evidence. Clues. Something I missed. And then I found it. In the back of her nightstand drawer, under an old scarf and some expired allergy meds, was a prepaid debit card. still in its paper sleeve. I checked the balance online for $1,000. And next to it, a burner phone. It was powered off. I didn't dare turn it on yet. But in that moment, I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until then. Tamara hadn't just cheated. She hadn't just left me for some smug idiot in Vegas. She had planned this. Carefully. Quietly. For weeks, maybe months. And I had been completely blind. I didn't touch the burner phone right away. I just stared at it for a long time, sitting there on the edge of the bed with the little black device resting in my palm like it weighed 10 pounds. It wasn't even a modern model. Some flip-style knockoff with a scratched plastic screen and a prepaid SIM card logo still stuck to the back. It looked innocent enough. Cheap. Disposable. Like it belonged to a teenager sneaking out after curfew or someone cheating on their taxes. Not my wife. Except Tamara wasn't my wife anymore. Not really. I kept forgetting that part. I finally powered it on sometime around 5 a.m. It took a few seconds to boot up, painfully slow, and the moment it loaded, it demanded a passcode. For digits. I tried the obvious ones. Our wedding anniversary. Her birthday. My birthday. The last four of her work ID. Nothing. On the fifth attempt, I just sat there staring, my thumb hovering above the keys, wondering if I even wanted to see what was inside. Like maybe, just maybe, it would be better not to know. To stay in this limbo where I could pretend it was all a mistake, or a drunken impulse, or a freak mental break she'd apologize for later. But that fantasy was gone the moment I remembered the driveway footage. The bags. The hug. So I entered the passcode I knew she'd use for something she didn't want me to see. Her mother's birthday. Tamara hated her mother, which made it perfect. For digits, burned into her brain, yet something I would never guess unless I thought like her. Cold, calculated, spiteful. It worked. The phone opened. No apps. No photos. No saved contacts. Just a call log, a few outgoing texts, and one voicemail notification. I opened the texts first. There were only a handful, all recent. Most were from a number labeled J. Short messages like 9 p.m. Be ready. And he'll be asleep, I checked. Then one final message, just 2 days before the Vegas trip. You don't owe him anything. You never did. My skin crawled. That didn't sound like Hunter. Hunter was arrogant, sure, but I had met him once during Tamara's holiday work party. He was the kind of guy who bragged about his protein shake recipes and asked if my real job was being a stay-at-home husband. The guy texting her now, he sounded darker, more controlling. Or maybe I was just reading it that way through my fog of betrayal. Then I checked the voicemail. My thumb hovered over the play button. I put the speaker to my ear and pressed it. It was a man's voice, low, confident, maybe mid-40s by the tone. He didn't say her name, didn't identify himself. Just said, if he starts poking around, remind him he signed everything over in March. He's got no leg to stand on. We're almost there. Click. That was it. 12 seconds. No background noise. No caller ID. But the words hit me like a hammer. Remind him he signed everything over in March. What the hell did that mean? I scrambled to my file cabinet, yanking open the drawer where we kept old paperwork. Taxes. Lease documents. Insurance. Everything. I started flipping through folders like a madman, pulling out anything dated between February and April. And then I saw it. A notarized financial authorization form. Signed by me. Dated March 11th. It was buried in a folder labeled Utility Rebates. I must have signed it thinking it was part of some refinance paperwork for our joint account. Tamara had asked me to just sign quickly before I forget, saying we'd talk through it later. I hadn't even read it. I was in the middle of trying to fix a leaking sink that day, covered in sweat and plumber's putty, and I trusted her. Of course I did. The document gave her control over all joint assets, all banking decisions, power of attorney for anything under both names. I had signed myself out of my own life, and she had planned it months ago. I dropped the folder and sat on the floor, leaning back against the filing cabinet like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. Every inch of trust one had left in her, every lingering piece of maybe she's just confused, evaporated in that moment. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment elopement. It was an operation, a quiet, well-calculated removal of me. And now I had a burner phone full of half-buried messages, a suspicious voicemail, and no idea who the man behind it was. But I was going to find out, because if they thought I'd just roll over and accept it, they didn't know how far gone I already was. The next morning, I woke up on the floor again, not from exhaustion, but because I'd spent hours trying to break into the metadata of the burner phone's voicemail. I'm not a tech guy, not really, but I know how to Google, and I know how to follow a rabbit hole when it looks like it might lead somewhere worth falling into. And this voicemail? It was a sinkhole, deep, dark, and absolutely not meant for me. I downloaded the audio file to my laptop and ran it through a few online tools. Background filters, frequency enhancement, anything that might give me a clue. I was hoping for an address, a location ping, maybe even a reflection in a voice assistant, but that's not what I found. What I found was intent. The man's voice, cool and professional, had traces of an accent. East Coast, maybe New Jersey. There was a slight clipped tone, the way someone speaks when they're used to being obeyed. I played it at half speed, then again at 1.5x. There was a rustling sound at the end that hadn't caught my ear before, almost like paper. And then it hit me. It wasn't paper. It was money. A stack of bills being thumbed through. This wasn't a voicemail to a lover. It was a transaction. A deal. My blood ran cold. I tried the number again, of course. Deadline. Burner. Disconnected. But I had a timestamp, and I still had one resource left that Tamara had no idea existed. My cousin Zach. Zach's what you'd call the black sheep of the family. Smart kid, bad life choices. Used to do tech work for questionable people in Phoenix before retiring to fix cracked iPads and rig lottery machines in gas stations. We weren't close, but I knew he owed me. Back in 2019, I bailed him out of a DUI that could have ended his freedom, and I never asked for anything in return. Until now. I messaged him. No names, just need a lookup. Burner call. 3 days ago. Time code plus area. I included the file and the limited metadata I had. He replied in 5 minutes flat. Who the hell are you messing with? That ping came from a law office. Downtown Des Moines. The kind that doesn't advertise. You sure you want me to dig deeper? I stared at the screen. A law office? Why would a lawyer, or someone inside a law office, be leaving secret voicemails on a burner phone hidden in my wife's nightstand? I replied, yes. Deeper. While I waited, I started pulling out every financial document I had. Tamara's work bonus letters, our tax returns, old job contracts. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. I just knew something wasn't right. She had access to everything. But I had never thought to question how much she moved around. Her job changed titles almost every other year. Her firm was always restructuring. And then there was the house. We didn't own it. We rented. Or so I thought. Until I pulled out a document I barely remembered signing. It was a lease-to-own agreement, updated just 3 months ago. And my name? Nowhere on it. Zach messaged back about an hour later. Guy's name is Jerome Langley. He's not just a lawyer. He's an asset protection consultant. Mostly deals in high-income divorce shielding. Private clients only. He's got 4 LLCs, 2 of which are tied to women I found in recent separation filings. Guess what? Same pattern, joint accounts, asset draining, then emergency claims filed against the husbands to block retaliation. I didn't respond right away. My chest felt like it was being crushed in a slow-moving vice. I wasn't just a broken husband anymore. I was a mark. Tamara had hired someone, a professional, to legally erase me before I even knew I was in danger. Everything had been engineered. The Vegas stunt, the marriage, the call to the police. It was all cover fire for the real plan. She didn't want a dramatic breakup. She wanted to vanish me on paper and make sure I had no recourse when it was done. And it almost worked. But here's the thing about being underestimated for a decade. It teaches you how to listen, how to watch quietly, how to bide your time. They thought I'd break. They thought I'd shut down, shut up, maybe drink myself into a corner or sign a few final papers just to make the pain go away. But I wasn't going away. Not anymore. The most dangerous thing I ever did wasn't closing our joint account. It wasn't freezing her credit cards or changing the locks. It wasn't even poking around with a burner phone linked to a shady divorce consultant. No, the most dangerous thing I did was stay quiet once I knew the truth. See, when someone plots this much to erase you, they don't expect you to watch them. They expect you to collapse, disappear, rage, call your mom, call a lawyer, call a therapist. Anything loud, reactive, messy. That's what people do when they're panicking. But I didn't panic. I watched. For the first time in 11 years, I stopped trying to save the marriage, to explain myself, to prove my worth, or to win her back. I leaned into the version of myself she had already painted in her mind. The weak, passive, pathetic guy with nothing left. I didn't respond to her last voicemail. I didn't touch the accounts. I didn't even change the Wi-Fi password. I let her believe the system was still working in her favor. And while she played chess in public, I started digging behind the curtain. I created a new email, used a VPN, set up burner cloud storage. Every file I scanned, every document I found, I logged it. Timeline, author, digital signature. I began to build a record of everything she'd shifted behind my back. Our lease, our auto insurance, the life insurance beneficiary switch I somehow signed while sick with the flu last year. There was even a tax adjustment filed 3 weeks ago redirecting our refund to a different bank account. Not ours. Not even hers. A shell account under the name Weller Property Group, LLC. Guess who the signatory was? Jerome Langley. I didn't know exactly how far this went, but the dots were connecting fast. This wasn't just a breakup. It was a full-fledged identity reallocation. And if I didn't act soon, I wasn't just going to lose money or dignity. I was going to lose my legal personhood and any shared assets I still thought were half mine. But I also couldn't tip my hand. Not yet. So I made a call, one I hadn't wanted to make in years. My older brother, Mason. We hadn't spoken since our dad's funeral. He thought I was soft. Always said I let tomorrow walk all over me. You're her golden retriever, he'd once told me at Thanksgiving. She throws a tennis ball, you sprint and say thank you. He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't calling him to prove anything. I was calling him because Mason knew how to disappear, not emotionally, but on paper. He'd filed bankruptcy twice, changed his legal address to a UPS store in Arizona, and once registered a motorcycle under a defunct seafood company just to dodge a speeding ticket. So I told him everything. And to his credit, he didn't mock me. He just whistled through the phone and said, "Damn, she was playing you like a stock market. You were the investment, now you're the liquidation." Then he said something I'll never forget. "You want to survive this? Stop trying to expose her. Start making yourself untraceable." He walked me through it. How to create a paper trail of movement. How to withdraw cash in increments that don't flag systems. How to open a second-layer bank account through a third-party payroll app that doesn't tie to credit. He even gave me a contact, a guy named Ron who used to help service members store assets during messy divorces. Said he owed him a favor. I spent the next 3 days quietly relocating my life. No one knew. Not my coworkers, not my friends, not even my next-door neighbor who always waved at me while mowing his lawn. I began pulling digital fingerprints out of our devices, erased shared logins, removed my Face ID from her phone. Every step was careful, quiet, surgical. I knew she'd come looking again, not for me, but for what was left of me. She'd want to know why the account wasn't bouncing anymore, why I hadn't called her back, why the backup keys were missing, why my name suddenly popped up in a state archive linked to an LLC she hadn't created. That's right. I started my own shell company, a mirror of the one she used. Registered 2 states over, under a similar sounding name, flagged it as dormant. But I gave it one very specific purpose, ownership transfer. And guess whose name was still on the vehicle title, buried under a form we both signed 2 years ago, but never filed properly? Mine. She thought she stripped me clean. But all she'd done was forget to finish the job. And now, I had leverage. But I wasn't going to use it. Not yet. Because I still hadn't figured out the most important question of all. Why go through this much effort? If all she wanted was out. No one fakes a marriage to a coworker in Vegas just to skip a breakup talk. No one hires a lawyer to erase a man she could have simply divorced and moved on from. No, this wasn't about love. It was about something else. And deep down, I knew whatever it was. It hadn't happened yet. It was almost 1 a.m. when I finally followed the money far enough to see where it ended. And it didn't end with Tamara. That's what shocked me the most. For weeks I'd been convinced she was the mastermind behind all of this. The fake Vegas marriage, the asset transfers, the burner phone, the legal manipulation, the subtle rewriting of my life. But now, as I sat in front of my laptop under the dim glow of a dying kitchen bulb, staring at the digital paper trail I had stitched together like a paranoid detective, the truth began to shape itself in a way I hadn't expected. This wasn't about breaking me down. This was about disappearing me and leaving no fingerprints. The final clue came from a recurring $200 monthly payment I noticed buried in one of our older joint accounts, starting 9 months ago. It had always seemed insignificant, labeled vaguely as wellness package, the kind of thing you assume is a gym membership or a meditation app subscription. But I never signed up for it. And tomorrow wasn't the yoga type. Still, I'd never questioned it. Why would I? People have apps. I wasn't a control freak. I let things go. This time, I traced the merchant ID. It wasn't a wellness app. It was a shell clinic. One that specialized in discrete transitional counseling and asset-neutral therapy processing. Code words, it turns out, for legal psychological evaluations used in contested divorce trials. Specifically the kind used to paint a spouse as emotionally unstable, volatile, or mentally unfit to retain financial control. She had been building a narrative, not just of a crumbling marriage, but of a husband with a deteriorating mental state. Suddenly, so many things made sense. The journal she encouraged me to keep and leave somewhere easy to find. The way she'd press record on her phone and claim it was for capturing sweet moments, especially after arguments. The passive comments she'd made in front of her coworkers. He's been acting a little off lately, or Clint forgets a lot these days. It's sad. She was breadcrumbing a version of me that didn't exist. A version no court would trust with joint assets or custody if it ever came to that. And the scariest part? It almost worked. Because I'd started to believe her. That I was paranoid. That I was overreacting. That I was being small, insecure, sensitive. That I wasn't the man she married anymore. That I wasn't enough. But now I saw the truth. Tamara didn't want to leave me. That would have been too simple. Too obvious. Too legally messy. She wanted me to leave her. To spiral. To explode. To walk out and not come back so she could tell everyone, family, friends, the court, that she had no choice but to move on. He left. I tried everything. He just couldn't handle life. And if I hadn't found the burner phone, the voicemail, the documents, if I hadn't traced that tiny recurring payment, I probably would have played right into it. There was one moment, 2 weeks before the Vegas trip, when I remember yelling. Just once. She'd come home 2 hours late from some client dinner, with a smug look and a perfume I didn't recognize. I asked if she'd been drinking. She smirked and said, "Why? Are you going to ground me?" And I snapped. I shouted, "You don't get to treat me like a doormat and pretend I'm the crazy one." I remember how calmly she picked up her phone and turned the screen toward me. "Just want to remember this moment," she said. "You're never this honest." Now I realized that was a performance. And I was the actor too naive to know he was already part of the script. I needed proof. Not just files. Something personal. Undeniable. So I took a risk. I went to the storage unit we still shared, the one we used mostly for holiday decorations and old furniture. I hadn't been there in months. I used my copy of the key and walked in expecting dust and nostalgia. What I found was a box labeled emergency. Inside were printed transcripts. Not digital. Not emailed. Printed. Call logs. Old text screenshots. Even pages from my journal. The one she said she never read, annotated in red pen. And a checklist. At the top, written in her handwriting. Clint's decline, observations for legal backup. Below it, sleep disruption, check. Isolation behavior, check. Emotional volatility, check. Passive-aggressive tone when challenged, check. Mild depressive symptoms, document in journal. Prior incidents of conflict escalation, audio, video, secured. My ears were ringing. My heart felt like it had stopped. I sat down on a folding chair next to an old lamp and just stared at it all, spread across my lap like evidence in a crime I hadn't even realized I was the suspect in. She had built a case, not to prove I was dangerous, but to prove I didn't deserve to be heard. And in a few more days, maybe a week, she probably would have had enough to convince anyone that I needed to be left behind. But now I had something else. Leverage. I didn't confront her. Not at first. That would have given her too much power. Too much control over the narrative she had worked so hard to create. The one where I was broken, unpredictable, weak. No, I waited. I sat on the evidence. I backed up everything. I made copies of the documents from the storage unit, sent the audio files to encrypted drives, documented the bank activity. I built my own case, not to destroy her, but to protect myself from the version of me she wanted to fabricate. And then I waited for her to make the next move. It came 2 weeks later. Certified mail. A thick envelope with her attorney's logo on the corner, Langley & Associates. Inside was a letter requesting a formal mediation meeting, citing abandonment of marital partnership, financial aggression, and signs of deteriorating mental stability. There it was, her endgame, in black and white, the final performance. Except she wasn't ready for what I had prepared. I showed up to the meeting with my own counsel, a quiet woman named Olivia Garrison, recommended by my brother's contact. She wasn't flashy. She didn't posture. But when she opened the manila folder of my collected records and began methodically laying them on the table, burner phone metadata, timeline logs, surveillance footage, journal annotations, bank activity, the checklist from storage, I watched Tamara's face change for the first time in weeks. Not anger, not confidence, but fear. She didn't say a word for the rest of the session. Her lawyer asked for a short recess after just 15 minutes. When they came back, the offer was different. Not arrogant, not demanding. Now it was quiet, subdued. Her team proposed a clean financial split, no claims on future income, no further asset freezes, and a full mutual separation agreement with sealed records. In plain terms, she folded. Because she had to. Because the story she wanted to sell, that I was unraveling, erratic, unfit, had been rewritten by facts. Documented, time-stamped, quietly prepared facts. I didn't lash out. I didn't fall apart. I just let the truth stand on its own feet. And in the end, it stood taller than her lies ever could. A month later, the divorce was finalized. She moved out of state, according to the legal transfer records I later saw. No public announcement. No celebration. Her Vegas husband. Turns out, that marriage wasn't real. Never filed. Just a photo for show. He never even moved in with her after. Probably realized what she was after and ran. Me? I took some time. Moved into a small place on the edge of town. Got a dog. Started freelance work again. It was quiet, and I needed quiet. I started sleeping better. I cooked for myself. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. One afternoon, months later, I got a text from an unknown number. No name. Just, you were never supposed to fight back. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because she was wrong. I didn't fight her. I simply refused to disappear.